Hey everybody, welcome to today's live stream. Today we're going to be talking about nervous system dysregulation or nervous system regulation. And I wanted to address this topic because honestly, I see this term coming up a lot on social media. Maybe it's something that you've heard about and you've been wondering about, how does this apply to me? And so I thought maybe it would be a good time to address it. So here we are. And I guess I could say, if you are a person, if you've been struggling with burnout, if you feel like you might be on the verge of burnout, or maybe if you'd more put it in the terms of you've been really stressed out lately and exhausted, then this live is for you. You're definitely going to want to listen up and hear about, what does this have to do with your nervous system? Because we're going to talk about what nervous system dysregulation looks like. In that discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about what your stress response looks like, how that works, how repeatedly activating our stress response can, what kind of symptoms can come up, what are the symptoms of nervous system dysregulation. And I'm also going to talk about a few things that you can do to bring your body back into balance, to get away from that feeling of exhaustion, of feeling on edge, of feeling burnt out. Basically, how do we regulate our own nervous system? So that is what's on our agenda for today. So I think a good place to start off would be to talk about stress. And first to say that stress, it's not just something that is up here. It's not just mental. It's not just emotional. That is the way that I think that most of us kind of tend to conceptualize it. I'm so stressed out. My mind's all over the place. I've got so many things going on. I don't know how to handle it. I feel overwhelmed. Those are all, those are kind of like our common ways of thinking about stress. But really, I want to convince you today, and I think that I will, that stress is a full body experience. It affects us in so many ways. You might already be aware of this, but it really does impact your physical health in a lot of ways that you might not even realize. So we're going to talk about that. The other thing I want to mention to start off is that stress is really unavoidable, right? We might want to get rid of all the stress in our life, but I'm not going to kid you, it's not possible. There's always going to be big stressful things that happen to all of us over the course of our lives that I think uniformly, we're all going to be impacted by, the death of a loved one, having to move, having to start a new job. These are all, I could go on and on. These kind of big life changes, in our environment, in our social relationships. These are the types of things that anyone would feel stress about. So on the one hand, it's unavoidable, but stress is also unavoidable in another way, in that stress is, it's actually helpful to us in a lot of ways. Every day at the very beginning of the day, everyone is we all get out of bed in the morning, right? That right there, believe it or not, is a stressful experience for your body. Moving from sleep to getting up and moving your body. That is, getting out of bed. That is, your body gives you a jolt of cortisol, which you might have heard is your, stress hormone. That's one time a day when we all experience a little bit of stress, in a good way, because it helps us live our lives. We also experience, a good amount of stress that helps us perform in a lot of ways. Like if you had to, give a presentation at work, if you had to perform in some kind of way, maybe now or when you were a kid, for instance, if you're going to perform in a dance recital or, in a play, or you're going to be, playing an instrument or something like that, and you had a recital, all stress helps us, you get those little butterflies in your stomach, and it kind of, hopefully in a good way, helps you get through those moments of performance. Stress even helps us get through a challenging workout. So in many ways, Stress is really good. Our body's ability to handle stress is a good thing. But here's the thing. There can be too much of a good thing. Thanks, guys, for joining. When your brain perceives a threat, basically something that is stressful, your body responds. And this is going to happen whether that stress is, one of those good kinds of stress that we just talked about, or whether the threat, the so-called threat is, a conflict with a coworker, or an argument with your kids, or even, you check your email and you got, a difficult email and that you have to deal with from work, and now you're stressed out about it, or even a bear chasing after you. Seriously, a bear or a lion, some kind of wild animal kind of threatening an actual threat to your life. So first, in any of these situations, and one thing I want to make clear here is that your brain is not going to necessarily distinguish between, your brain's not necessarily going to distinguish like the threat level between a difficult meeting or a difficult encounter at work and a bear chasing after you. It's going to respond the same way no matter what. Your body will respond the same way no matter what. And here's what that response looks like. First, your stress response, your sympathetic nervous system is going to become activated. And this is your fight or flight response. All your body's energy at this time is going to start to be directed to life-saving activities, because our body's really responding. Like I said, it can't distinguish between you got a difficult email and you're being chased by a bear. Its default is, I'm going to respond as if I'm getting chased by a bear. I'm going to make sure that we escape that threat and that we continue to live a productive life, happy life. So sugar that's being stored in your body is going to get released into your bloodstream, and it's going to go to your limbs so that you can escape, or that you can fight. You can run away or you can fight physically. Adrenaline and cortisol, two hormones, are going to get released through your body. They're going to course through your body and jolt you with some extra strength. And this is like, if you've ever heard of those stories where, man lifts car off of woman and saves her life, some kind of crazy, superhuman kind of feats of strength. This is why we're able to do that. You might have already kind of heard about this in terms of, the importance of adrenaline and giving us that kind of like extra rush. But this is kind of why it's happening. It's our body's stress response allowing us to perform at a level, physically perform at a level that we normally can't. So that's going to happen. Your heart rate is going to increase, sending oxygenated blood to all of your parts of your body that need it the most, which are your limbs and your brain. Your pupils and your eyes are going to dilate, and your vision sharpens. Your mind also becomes sharper so that you can think fast and escape, or do what needs to get done to save your life. So all of this, you can see how this is so important to human survival. This stress response, what happens when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, it's super important. At the same time as all of this is happening though, non-essential or not immediately essential bodily functions are going to get slowed down. So that would include a couple big ones that you might think of would be like digestion. Digestion's going to get put on the back burner until we have dealt with the threat. Sexual arousal, reproduction is going to get put on the back burner until we can deal with the threat. I'm going to take a sip of my water here. And again, it doesn't matter if the threat is a bear, real threat to our life, like a bear, or if it's like just a possibly perceived threat, like an email or an argument with somebody. Your body responds similarly, and it's going to respond in the same way. So normally when the threat is over, your sympathetic nervous system is going to deactivate and your parasympathetic nervous system steps in and things go back to normal. If you've ever heard of this book, and I'll be totally honest, I haven't read it yet, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's, it's kind of the idea there, why zebras don't get ulcers, is that, if you looked into nature, you've got a pack of zebras, a lion comes, they all go everywhere, escaping for their lives. When the lion's gone, maybe because when it killed one of the zebras and they're not interested in the rest of the zebras anymore, zebras don't freak out. They don't continue, worrying about it. They just kind of like go back to like chomping on grass. Humans aren't like that, unfortunately. We kind of hold on to stress in our body, or in our mind, and then in our body at the same time. So I bring that up to say that, basically we want to be existing most of the time in that zebra relaxed, rest and digest state. For the most part, we want to be living, probably a majority of our lives with our parasympathetic nervous system activated, allowing us to relax, to rest, to be in a relaxed state so that we can, engage with other people, to think creatively, in order for our digestive system to work. If you've noticed that you feel like, maybe I've been under a lot of stress, and you're also noticing any kind of digestive problems, there's a good likelihood that those two things, that they're connected to one another. So basically, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system should maintain a healthy balance, with your sympathetic nervous system only being turned on when it really, really has to be. Basically to protect your life or help you get through legitimately stressful situations where you need to perform. This is what a regulated nervous system looks like, that healthy balance that tends to be called homeostasis. But when your stress response is repeatedly activated, like it is for so many of us, in today's modern society, with so many multiple pressures coming on us from a lot of different directions, from family, from work, from the world, from politics. When it's repeatedly activated, your body has a more difficult time coming back into balance. It becomes harder and harder the more often that your stress response is activated. It becomes harder and harder to come back to the rest and digest state especially if we don't have healthy coping mechanisms in place. And I'll talk about what that looks like in a few minutes. But what would it look like? I said at the beginning of this live stream that stress impacts our body physiologically, not just emotionally and mentally, which is equally important, but it affects us physiologically. So what does that look like? So, one thing I just mentioned is that you might be noticing, digestive issues like IBS or constipation, because your body can't rest long enough in order to properly digest its food. Your libido could diminish. You can become exhausted a lot of the time, and your sleep can suffer. One thing that you might notice, have you ever heard of this term called tired and wired? This is basically, this is kind of a layman's term of this phenomenon where we are, because we're so stressed, and we have this imbalance in our, nervous system regulation. We have a lot of cortisol going through our body, and it's where our cortisol level is high when it shouldn't be and a low when it shouldn't be. And the result is that, you wake up, you're exhausted, you're probably fueling with coffee at some point. You're exhausted throughout the day. This used to happen to me, so I'm very, very well versed in how this feels like. And I've talked to a lot of women about it, and as soon as I describe it, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So, if this is you, you're not alone. But it's like you wake up, you're exhausted, you really don't want to get out of bed. It seems like you're exhausted all day long. You're struggling through that afternoon. I used to feel when I remember my last couple years, teaching sociology, I was exhausted in the afternoon, and I would come home from work and I would just plop on the sofa and just try to relax. But here's the thing, when it came time to go to bed, I was wide awake. I couldn't sleep. Another way that this can manifest is you're able to sleep and then you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, like clockwork, on a regular basis. This is what I refer to as the tired but wired. You're tired, but you're so wired you just can't sleep properly. So this is just another symptom of nervous system dysregulation, of this imbalance of your sympathetic nervous system, your stress response being turned on too frequently. Some other things that you might experience, brain fog, headaches or migraines, becoming more frequent than they were in the past, or maybe you never had them before, now you do. Your immune system even can become weakened with repeated exposure to stress and without those healthy coping mechanisms in place. And the result of that is that you're left susceptible to illness. Over time, you might be gaining weight, especially around your midsection. Or you could find it increasingly difficult to lose weight. And obviously there are a lot of reasons why it can be difficult to lose weight, but this is one of them. And this is partly because the constant increase in cortisol in your body can slow down your metabolism, but at the same time making you crave, certain kinds of foods. And you probably already know what they are. When we're stressed, what kind of foods do we crave? We crave fatty foods. We crave salty foods. We crave carb-heavy kind of foods. Basically, foods that can, at a really basic level, that could assist us in escaping a life-threatening, stressful situation. Foods that kind of convert into instant energy in our body. And you could also, obviously, it's not just about this, instinctual craving for those foods to help with escaping stress or escaping, the bear chasing after you. It's also that you're going to probably crave what you consider to be comfort foods in order to cope with the feelings and the emotions of stress. So it kind of comes from two directions. This, contributing to weight gain or the inability to lose weight when we're under a lot of stress. Now, those are some physiological symptoms that you might be experiencing. Emotionally, you might find that you're getting increasingly kind of moody, feeling overwhelmed, easily irritated, quick to snap. Your overall anxiety could increase, and you might find yourself, short of breath, seemingly for no reason at really odd times. Even, becoming dizzy, or you could even worse, sometimes experience panic attacks. And again, I'm talking about these things, not just from, the research out there, the established research, but also from my own personal experiences. These are all things that have happened to me. One thing that didn't happen to me, but that I know has happened to other women who have been chronically stressed, over a long period of time is, actually fainting. I hope that has not happened to you. But if it has, this could be, part of the explanation for you. Obviously, another thing, you could be starting to feel depressed. So these are all some emotional, I would put it, some kind of more mental or emotional symptoms that would indicate that we've been dealing with chronic stress, that our stress response has been turned on too frequently, and that we have what we would call nervous system dysregulation. And, when this goes unchecked, when we don't develop some coping mechanisms, when we don't find ways to regulate our nervous system, a lot graver health issues can unfortunately develop. And those might include, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, autoimmune conditions, chronic pain. Those are, some of the big ones that we really don't want to happen to us. So in all these symptoms that I'm mentioning, chronic stress or nervous system dysregulation is really at the source of so much of it. It's not the only thing, but it is at the source of a lot of these health issues that you might be experiencing. And it's, on the flip side, if you are feeling like you've been chronically stressed, if you've been, under a lot of stress and you haven't been doing anything to cope with it and to bring your body back into balance, then these are not to scare you, but these are things that can happen when we do nothing. So, next question is, what can you do to regulate your nervous system? Now, first of all, your nervous system is automatic, right? I can't impact it the way that I can't say regulate. I can't say to my nervous system, fix yourself, regulate, any more than I can with my brain just tell my heart to beat faster. I can't regulate it in terms of the same way that I can decide I want to lift my arm off the table and then lift my arm off the table. We don't have that kind of control. Our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, runs without you telling it to. And when I say autonomic nervous system, basically the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system are part of your autonomic nervous system, which basically controls a whole list of bodily functions that like your heart rate, your respiration, your digestion, things that happen automatically that you don't have, they're involuntary, that you don't have control over in a direct way, regardless of whether you want to or do not want to change the way that they work. But there are things that you can do to indirectly activate your parasympathetic nervous system and get your body into a rest and digest mode, and get yourself out of fight or flight mode. So I don't know if that makes sense. There's things that we can indirectly do to make that happen. So before I go into, I'm going to give you a few examples. I could probably do a separate live just going through those examples in a little bit more detail, but I want to just touch upon this a bit right now. One thing I want to note is, while there are things that you can do like in the moment, for the most part, keeping your body, keeping your nervous system in balance, it's really going to work best if you choose a couple of coping mechanisms to practice on a daily basis. So like regularly, and you just make it part of your life. And it's also one of those things where just doing it once for one day, you might not notice a difference in your life, or in how you feel. But you do it every day over, a couple of weeks, and you may start to notice a difference. You do it longer, you do it for more weeks, months, and you really, really start to notice a difference in how you feel. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to commit to doing something and just putting it into action. So the other thing I want to mention is that you likely already have some tools. You probably already have some tools for coping with stress. And I guess I just want to take a quick minute and mention what not to do. And it's really hard to not do some of these things. But some things that I notice that I have done in the past, or that I know from, talking to my clients of what they have been doing, or just talking to, friends or just people, about what they do to cope with stress. I know that these are very common things, and they help us in the short term, but they actually make matters worse over the long run. And those things are, alcohol. Alcohol is going to make things worse in the long run. It might make you feel better in the short run. But I'll just give you one example. So coming home, having a glass or 2 or 3 of wine in order to unwind after a difficult day at work. Very common practice, I think, at least I would say in the United States and probably in many places. Very common practice, very common thing that we would reach for, to feel better, to deal with our stress. But it also has the impact of, one of the negative impacts of drinking in the evening after we've worked all day long is, even if you're able to fall asleep easily, you're probably going to wake up in the middle of the night. And even if you don't, you're probably going to have poor quality sleep. And what happens when you have poor quality sleep? What happens the next day? The morning becomes difficult. You don't want to get out of bed in the morning. You have a difficult next day. Everything feels hard. You're fueling with coffee. You're eating crappy foods to give you energy. You're grabbing those muffins and donuts and whatever it is that you particularly crave in your life. So it kind of like sets you in kind of like a vicious circle of kind of perpetuating stress and burnout. So, alcohol, another big thing is that I know some people do and some people might not do is, really intense, strenuous exercise to like get it all out. Strenuous exercise, like a HIIT class, for instance, or running, it actually activates our stress response. And so it has the opposite effect that we might want it to have. It can actually, it doesn't get us into that rest or digest state. It does, it burns some energy. But if you're in this point where you've been dealing with stress for a long time, you're feeling on the verge of burnout, or you're already there, and you do still have the energy to do, that power yoga class, that run, that HIIT class, that, what is the other thing, like CrossFit or whatever. These are things that can actually make things worse. So let's talk about a few things that you can do that will help your body get into a rest and digest state, which in the end is going to bring you, more energy in your life, and it should have probably reverberating effects in your life. So we're kind of thinking about, I like to kind of think about it as also kind of a starting point, like just picking one of these things that you can work on as a starting point and then seeing where it takes you. So a few ideas. One is, getting outside and into nature and just, this might sound kind of woo-woo, but practicing presence. Just noticing your surroundings, noticing sights, sounds, texture, just noticing what's around you and just experiencing being in the moment. So that's one thing that you can do, also like feeling the feeling of fresh air entering your lungs. So getting out into nature. A second idea is meditation. There are so many apps out there right now, meditation apps. A couple that I've tried are, Insight Timer, Breathe. What was the other one? Calm. I think I had a trial with that one for a little bit. These are all, and you don't need to use a meditation app, but these are all kind of some easy ways to get into meditation. And meditation is also one of those things where, where you're also just like being in nature and doing, paying attention to what's around you. With meditation, it's kind of similar in that you're going to be practicing presence. Maybe by focusing on a particular thought, a particular word, or focusing on your breath. And this is one of those things where you could start it, just for a couple of minutes a day. It doesn't have to be a huge chunk of your day. It's just the idea in the case of meditation would be to do it every day. Kind of similar to meditation is breath work. This is where, so sometimes meditation is not focused on a particular way of breathing, but another thing that we can do is instead of focusing on a word or even closing our eyes, we can just focus on our breath. And you could do that actually at any time of the day. Personally, I like to do meditation first thing in the morning when my mind's the clearest. It also ensures that I get it done during the day, because oftentimes I won't do it later in the day if I don't do it first thing. Take some water. But there's a lot of ways that we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system simply by controlling our rate of our breathing. I'll give you an example from my own life. So if you've been following me on here for a little bit, you probably know that I like to surf. I also get anxious in really heavy or large surf. And one of the things that I have learned to do when I start feeling anxious in the water is I practice breathing. And one of the types of breathing that I practice, it's called box breathing. And actually the military, I think Navy SEALs use this particular type of breathing where you kind of like imagine you're breathing kind of like around a box, and each side of the box is a count of 4. And you breathe in for a count of 4, your count of 4, not my count of 4. You kind of have to count it yourself, but you breathe in for a count of 4. You hold your breath for a count of 4. You breathe out for a count of 4, and then you hold your lungs empty for a count of 4, and you just do that. And it's kind of like helps you get out of a stressful state. So that's something that you could practice doing in the morning, and you can also use it when you're in a difficult situation in order to calm your body down, to calm your nervous system. Other things that you can do would be, moving your body, but again, not doing, the difficult kind of movements like, not kind of exerting ourselves too much, but just moving our body. It could be walking. It could be doing a yoga class, not power yoga, but some kind of a yoga class. You could try doing Tai Chi. I think even, you could do walking. I think even something that would kind of fit into this category. I was kind of trying to brainstorm about this earlier today. But, bicycling or cycling, if it's a kind of biking that is kind of easygoing. I'm thinking about I have a bike path in my town. So sometimes I take out the cruiser and I just kind of ride the bike up and down the bike path. And it's kind of nice and relaxing and doesn't use too much. It's not strenuous. I'm not increasing my heart rate too much. That's a kind of exercise that we want that's going to help our body get back into the rest and digest state. And also, doing this kind of exercise, it can help to burn off some of the energy, so that you can sleep better. A couple other, I made a couple notes for this live, and I just want to make sure that I mention things that I haven't, that I forgot about. A couple other things that you want to avoid. I know I already mentioned alcohol. I mentioned high stress, or really strenuous, exercise. But, a couple other things would be scrolling social media, binging on Netflix or whatever your favorite, streaming program is. Mine tends to be Netflix or Hulu. But basically, mindless activities that, are good in small doses, but are really not going to help you get into that rest and digest state. Now, if you want to do the binging on the Netflix or the scrolling, go ahead. But you also want to have, one of these other healthy coping strategies that I mentioned. You want to be able to put something like that into place. And one thing I will say about scrolling social media, less so when it comes to Netflix, but scrolling social media can actually, it can have like a negative, I think it is a coping mechanism, because so many times, we're stressed out. What is the first thing that we turn to? We pick up our phone, we start, we open Instagram or you open Facebook and you start scrolling, right? But think about for a minute, what comes up when you are scrolling, supposed wonderful things that are going on in other people's lives. How does that make you feel? Maybe maybe try this as an experiment. Next time that you're scrolling, just kind of like be observant of how you're processing the information that you're seeing. Is it making you feel worse or better about yourself? Anyways, I guess the point that I'm kind of coming at, I guess, from this is that scrolling social media, it is a coping mechanism that many of us use. And I don't think it's a healthy coping mechanism because, A, we're not being present when we're doing it. And B, it can actually make us feel worse about our lives and become an added stressor. There are many things that we're probably doing in our lives that add stress to our life. And mindlessly scrolling for hours on end, it's just one of them. So, summing up, we've been going on for almost 40 minutes here. So if you're still hanging on, I think I'm going to wrap this up now. I hope that you have a better understanding of how stress physiologically impacts your body when you don't do anything to manage it over time. I hope you have a better understanding of the term nervous system dysregulation that you might see, popping up when you're scrolling. I hope that it makes a little bit more sense to you. I hope you have, an idea of being able to sit back and assess for yourself, is this something that I am experiencing right now? And I hope you also have an idea of what are some of the coping strategies that you could use. And I'd encourage you to choose one and try to put it into practice. If you need more ideas, feel free to send me a message. If you're unsure, if you have been like feeling on the verge of burnout and you feel like maybe you've been, experiencing some of these symptoms, but you're not sure if this is connected, message me. I'd love to be able to help you figure this out. So I hope that was helpful. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all again soon. Bye-bye.